Okay. Good morning, everybody. And Jay, I'm glad you didn't say too much about exactly what I was going to talk about, because I think I changed the title and I definitely changed the content a bit about what I'm going to talk about here, in part driven by my knowledge that there was going to be so much said here about Sigma and California. And interestingly, there's a competing presentation, I think, about using agricultural land for recharge purposes here in California. And so what I'm going to do in my talk is, for the first few slides, talk about groundwater governance in a national context, and then also a nationwide context, some work that I'm doing. But then I am going to drill down a bit to something near and dear to me, and I talk about a lot, and that is groundwater management in Arizona. Because if you were in the plenary this morning and you looked at where there's significant agricultural acreage, you know, Arizona had a little bit in the center of the state, but you could barely see our agriculture on the western side along the Colorado River, where they're responsible for growing about 90% of the leafy vegetables that are eaten in the U.S. between November and March. So, but they're not dependent on groundwater, so I'm not going to talk about them. But we do have a lot of agricultural activity. So my presentation is going to be a mix. So I gave it the title, Groundwater Governance in the USA with a focus on Arizona agriculture. But to put, starting from the international context, I wanted to mention that both UNESCO, the International Hydrologic Program, and the Global Environmental Facility have undertaken some projects relating to groundwater governance. They have a website with some very good reports if anybody's interested in that. I have the website on my presentation at the bottom there of that slide. The OECD, and we heard about an OECD report. I don't know how many of you are familiar with OECD, but they put out about 300 reports a year. And they're not all on water and they're not all on agriculture, but they really gather a lot of data and put out compilations. And one of their recent initiatives has been a global water initiative, or a water governance initiative, WGI. And it crosses some of the different directorates there. And they've put out reports, and I've given you their website and shown you the picture of stakeholder engagement for inclusive water governance. My point being that there is a tremendous amount of interest in how we govern our water, our surface water, our groundwater, whether we do it integrated or not. I've actually also put up a definition. I don't know if anybody's given a definition of what we mean by governance. There is no single definition, and most attempts at definitions are more than one sentence, which I think is a bad idea for a definition. So I've put out the one that we used in an article that was published recently in the journal Groundwater. That's one sentence long. And it's really an overarching framework. It's more than just the who, the government. It's really the whole framework for how you're overseeing or setting the stage for then the management, the actual what do we do and the decisions made. So in the context of some of this international work, particularly the UNESCO project, they would talk about how water is governed in countries. And you may see maps, you know, is a country a water scarce or a water rich country? And sometimes you see the whole USA is in one color. I just happen to pick this off of Google Images. Sometimes it's blue, because generally if you look on average, you know, we're pretty good in the US, but we know we have these areas that are very water scarce. So the legal institutional governance context is very important, and you can't paint the U.S. with a single brushstroke. And so that motivated me and some colleagues to undertake a survey of water governance, in groundwater governance in particular, in the U.S. And so we did an initial survey, and at the end of my presentation, I'll have a slide that gives you the website. I'm not going to talk about the details. But we looked at individual states, just like we heard the OECD study surveyed their member countries. We got a response from every state. We asked them some basic questions. So I've just put up the map. Does state law recognize the connection between surface water and groundwater? And those were the answers we got, with those tannish colored ones being the no's. Since I've shown these slides, the survey was done a couple years ago, I've had people from certain states say, well, you have us colored wrong. And part of that is because it depends upon who you ask, the answer you get. So it's quite interesting, and that's motivated us to do some follow-up work, and we actually are undertaking a second state-level survey right now. I don't have the results to share with you. This is from the most recent USGS water census that just looks at the percentage of human water needs met by groundwater across the U.S. And again, the idea is that it's a mosaic. It's not a single color, it's a mosaic. And then when you drill down into the state level, and here's a map of Arizona showing our groundwater management areas and irrigation non-expansion areas, you again have a mosaic. So the idea is that this is very layered, it's very complicated. In fact, you will not find too many people who are experts in how we govern groundwater in too many different areas because it's so different and it varies, such as even the first presentation, it varies a lot. So as I said, I'll have a website at the end if any of you are interested in looking at that further. This is just, again, an example of the kind of graphic we put together as the percentage. This is the earlier census. When we published the paper in the journal Groundwater, we only had the 2005 data available, and this showed that percentage of groundwater to total withdrawals overlaid with states identifying declining groundwater levels as a priority. So that hatched mark shows how many states in our survey indicated declining groundwater levels were a priority. So now I want to move, though. I want to move into talking a little bit about Arizona. And there's lots written about it, lots you can find out about it, but I do think it's worth it at this conference for me to say a little bit about our groundwater use, agricultural groundwater use, and some things we've done to address some of our challenges associated with growing population, wanting to keep a vibrant agricultural sector, and climate change and all the things that cause stresses on aquifers. So just geographically, a lot of times when I speak internationally, I put up a map because everybody knows where California is, but a lot of people don't know where Arizona is. Well, you all should know where California is, and we're just to the southeast of California. We're part of the Colorado River Basin. That's very important to us because it provides about 40% of the water used in Arizona, and many of you, I'm sure, have been there, seen it, if not all of you, and you know that those bathtub rings around Lake Mead show that we're well under the storage capacity of Lake Mead, which is the largest storage reservoir in the United States, and we're getting dangerously low. The water has been up to here, and that just shows you how dangerously low we are. And we in Arizona pay a lot of attention to that because of the importance of Colorado River water to us. As I indicated, it provides about 40% of our water supply, but also because of the junior priority of the constructed Central Arizona project, which takes Colorado River water into Central Arizona and serves Phoenix and Tucson and agricultural users in between. And if you just look at the numbers there, Arizona as a state, about 40% of our water use is now groundwater, and about 40% is Colorado River water, 3% is officially recycled water, and then the rest is other surface water supplies. And our state laws do not recognize the connection between surface water and groundwater, but actually some of our policies do recognize that. And about 70% of the water diverted or extracted is by agriculture. In 1980, Arizona passed the Groundwater Management Act. It was related to getting the funding for the Central Arizona project, but to get that funding from the U.S. Congress, particularly a California-heavy delegation there, we had to agree to lower priorities. So our water delivered through the Central Arizona project to cities in Central Arizona, as well as others, could be cut completely before California is cut at all in terms of its Colorado River water deliveries. The act created active management areas. They're colored here, kind of through the central part of the state and up here, and then some irrigation non-expansion areas. So these are the areas, these active management areas, where groundwater is actively managed, particularly for municipal users, particularly for growing cities and towns that have to show they have 100-year, assured water supply. Added to the Groundwater Management Act in the mid-1980s and then refined in the early 1990s was a very carefully crafted framework for storage and recovery. And this is how we have actually been able to recognize the connection between surface water and groundwater by actually deploying infiltration basins to store water underground for future use. And one of the novel things we did was establish what we call groundwater savings facilities. And this is where we have encouraged through partnerships use of surface water in lieu of groundwater by agriculture. And therefore, agriculture saves that groundwater is saved. And that's why they're called a groundwater savings facility, because they're substituting surface water for groundwater. And the way that happens is partners come in, buy down the cost of the surface water. It's all regulated, permitted, accounted, and so forth. But the agriculture doesn't get the right to use that stored water in the future. It's the partner that helped buy down the cost of the water that gets the right to use that water in the future. And I'm going to come back to that. That's a bit of the rub in our system here because of the way the groundwater rights are established. So we have these storage facilities with storage credits. There's a photo of an agricultural field. This is in central Arizona. Those are cantaloupes growing with actually drip irrigation. A lot of people think we don't use drip irrigation very much, but it is used for certain crops. And this groundwater savings facility allows for these credits to be accrued. The whole recharge program, which is a vibrant program, and I've had people from other countries say, oh, I wish I knew about this because we just tried to develop a whole system. Again, we've got a lot written on that. If people are interested in that, I can send you some articles or direct you to some websites for that. And so this just shows that we have this USF underground storage groundwater savings capacity quite a bit. It's spread out not only in the active management areas, but across the state, but a lot of it is in central Arizona. And this shows the storage by the Water Banking Authority in central Arizona. So I have less than 5 minutes left, so I'm going to cover some of this really quickly, but I want to get back to the governance. Governance is very layered in many instances. We've heard about Texas, we've heard about Sigma, and certainly in Arizona, we have many different entities all working toward the same objective of having a secure water future. And we created an Arizona Water Banking Authority in 1996 to store water from the Colorado River that we knew would be available in the short term, but not in the long term. So the idea is we haven't just sat on our hands and said, oh my God, the sky is falling, we're going to have a shortage. We've kind of known that a shortage was going to be coming. It's coming maybe a little sooner and deeper than we expected. And we've been storing water underground for that future, both in underground storage facilities and in groundwater savings facilities. And not only on behalf of Arizona users, cities and towns and Indian tribes, but also on behalf of Nevada through a complex interstate sharing agreement. And so this figure, and now I'm coming, I don't have too many more slides left, but this is coming to the crux of what I wanted to add to this discussion that I wasn't planning to talk about. This shows where the Water Banking Authority has performed its storage for central Arizona, 4 times of shortage on the Colorado River. And the blues are the underground storage facilities. So those are those basins I showed you in the picture. The greens are the groundwater savings facilities, the agricultural fields. And then the light and dark, the light is on behalf of Nevada, the dark is on behalf of Arizona. But what you see here is this Pinal, that's Pinal County, active management area, which resides between Tucson and Phoenix, very populated, 4 million people or so up here, another million or so down here. This is a largely agricultural community, a lot of agricultural water use. They've got a lot of water stored there. And this final slide talks about shortage in central Arizona agriculture. And what will happen is when a shortage is declared, or maybe even sooner, based on the drought contingency planning going on, the first to be cut are those up here. And this ag pool, which is part of a very complicated settlement, talk about lawyers and the complexity of dealing with certain settlements, including Indian water rights settlements, they're the first to get cut. And that water stored by the Arizona Water Banking Authority is really to firm these municipal, industrial, and Indian priority waters. So what's going to happen to agriculture? And what's going to happen to groundwater use when those surface supplies that had been available to agriculture go away? So we've had water saved underground. The credits accrued are by municipal users and others. They could be mines and other users. So the ag, they don't have the credits, but they don't need the credits to go back on groundwater use. Our laws, as progressive and defined as they are, basically gave agriculture some groundwater rights in perpetuity. And so the challenge, the stress here, and the questions here are about what will agriculture do? Are they going to go back on the pump? Are they going to change cropping mixes? Are they going to fallow fields? And what is that going to do to the long-term water and storage? That's the key question there. And so for the purposes of this conference, we're talking about sustainable agriculture, sustainable groundwater and agriculture. And I have to admit, I participated in the first one of these conferences, and I'm here at the second. And exactly what do we mean when you have basin and range aquifers where it's fossil groundwater and basically most of the groundwater use is not being replenished by nature? The real question here is what is going to happen? Ag has the right to go back on the pump. They likely will. There are credits accrued to make up for shortages that might hit the cities and towns. And so we might be returning to the more significant overdraft that we had seen before the Groundwater Management Act and during the 80s. And Jay, I often put in one of your slides from one of your papers in there. I didn't in this one, trying to keep it short, where Jay shows the colors of the groundwater and storage across the U.S. And the colors aren't that bad in Arizona. The reason the colors aren't that bad in Arizona is because we've had this recharge and recovery framework, because we have substituted groundwater with surface water use. But that could change because of the situation with the Colorado River. And so it shows that it is all integrated, whether the law likes to or is recognizing this connection between surface water and groundwater. If there are rights to use, people will, utilize the water. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens as a result of the significant issues we're facing with the Colorado River. So I'm done. There's my email address and the site where we have a lot of our groundwater work. We pretty much post anything we do at the Water Center, or at least post an abstract if it's not an open access journal. So please feel free to visit us.